Hello, everyone. This is Brian Lewis of the Spin Zone, and we're on to the next team here in the NBA Offseason Review. This is a team that had quite a bit of action in the first round of the NBA draft, and this is the Brooklyn Nets. So let's backtrack a little bit on this team, too. So this was a team in 2021, right to the 2020-21 season, the season after the bubble year. They were a Kevin Durant, smaller foot size, away from one of the best game-winning shots I've ever seen in the playoffs, and they would have made the Eastern Conference Finals, and they might have won that series. Because Miami, no, that Jimmy Butler Miami team, the fact that they went to the finals is a joke to me. But besides the point, the Nets had James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and that unit. They disassembled that. They had Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They disassembled that. So right now, ironically, they are in kind of a no man's land position because they literally took 5 first round picks. So this draft, they took Igor Demon from BYU, which he's kind of a project guard. But keep in mind, you could have picked Cedric Coward, Derek Queen, Carter Bryant. Then, by the time you took the 19th pick, you decided to take Nolan Traore. You could have picked Yas Kunis from Illinois. You could have took Will Riley, even Drake Powell, who ended up with the Brooklyn Nets anyway. So Drake Powell's... And again, Drake Powell and Danny Wolf, I have no disagreements with. I think I have no disputes with those picks. I think those are schematically good selections, good players that I think down the line can be contributors for Brooklyn. But I don't understand Nolan Traore, Ben Saraf. Like, I don't know. You look at how Hugo Gonzalez looked for the Celtics. Liam McNeely was a highly regarded recruit, and you missed out on him. I think if Brooklyn took, per se, if Brooklyn decided to trade up to 13, say if they did what New Orleans did, right? Instead of picking Danny Wolf, why not trade 3 of those picks, offer it to Atlanta, and be like, hey, Atlanta Hawks, we're just going to trade up and take Derek Queen, and you take all this, or even take Carter Bryant. Brooklyn could have taken Carter Bryant to replace Cam Johnson. And at the end of the day, I think these are the little trades. These are the little moves that front offices miss that end up costing them down the line. Because now San Antonio, who was sitting there at the 14th pick, got to take Carter Bryant. Ironically, probably a top 8, top 9 pick. So you had Derek Queen and Carter Bryant were the last 2 picks in the lottery when those guys were top 10 talents. Shit happens in the NBA draft. It's a crapshoot sometimes, for sure. But it's like I said in the New Orleans video a second ago. Brooklyn, instead of being short-sighted like New Orleans, what I accuse New Orleans of doing, very similar to a Pete Babcock from the mid '90s to late '90s Atlanta Hawks. With Brooklyn, we're almost seeing the opposite. It's almost like they're trying to copy Oklahoma City's Sam Presti, where they're just going to draft a bunch of guys, see if they fit, and then if it don't work out, they're just going to move them. That's risky. That's very risky business because the Mavericks and the Suns tried that in the '90s, and the Suns got stuck with 4 point guards. The Mavericks got stuck with 5 wings. Needless to say, there's enough. Thank God for no social medias in that era. But there's just a lot of mishap. There's a lot of BS. That's not the way to build a basketball team. But at the same time, you have the Brooklyn Nets that are also dealing with. They just traded Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. And Michael Porter Jr. is not. For this team and Cam Johnson, I think it's actually good. Because the Nets, realistically, could just decide we're not going to totally suck we're just going to score a lot of points. And if they score a lot of points and make it a fun team, like the way they did a couple years ago with Mikal Bridges, when those guys came over from Phoenix for Kevin Durant, that was a fun Brooklyn Nets team. No, there were a lot of Nets fans that were excited about that team. NBA Twitter was off the frickin' hook for that team a couple years ago. So I think realistically, if Brooklyn's playing good, entertaining basketball and they get to that 40, 45 win threshold, it's going to be enough. But I think it's going to be hard pressed when Cam Johnson's going to want $30 million a year in that restricted free agent threshold. At this point, you're almost better off waiting to see if he actually signs that qualifying offer. And then with Cam Johnson, it's not like Cam Johnson's healthy and reliable either, but Porter's back injury concerns are an issue. But at the same time, Porter helps them reach the cap floor. They took Trey Mann, questionable move there. I just don't like their roster development. I think they could have done a lot better for the moves that they did. But realistically, they could still move Nick Claxton. Terrence Mann making $15 million a year is just not going to work in today's cap environment. But keep in mind, these are the guys that they basically are going to have. They have Igor Demon, Nolan Traore, Drake Powell, Ben Surratt, Danny Wolf, the 5 first-round picks. They still have Jalen Wilson, Tyrese Martin, and Keon Johnson, and they also have Derek Whitehead and Noah Clowney. So that's basically the majority of the roster, minus Drew Timme and Tyus Etienne, who are two-way contracts. So I think looking at the Nets, they still have $20 million in cap space. They were a part of the Porzingis swap with Niang, and they got Terrence Mann in that deal, but they were also able to get like a first-round pick out of it. I believe that's the pick that got him Drake Powell. So realistically, I like Drake Powell. I think Drake Powell could be a nice role player in the NBA. I see it. Saraf, I didn't see too much of. I had him as a second-round grade. Didn't really see too much of him. I felt like I needed more to make an assessment if he was a first-round grade or not, to be fair. Danny Wolf, I watched him a lot when he played in the Ivy League for Yale. Good player. Went to Michigan. Good choice for him to go to Michigan. That's a good basketball program. Took over for the bum that played there before. That went to Kansas and stunk it up at Lawrence, Kansas, by the name of Hunter Dickinson. So Wolf, in my opinion, is kind of like he kind of could be like a Brad Miller, but in essence, I could see him being like what's a better comparison? I almost feel like yeah, that Brad Miller mold, because he can be that pick and pop big, but he can also be a pick and roll big. He's very effective in the pick and roll, but he's not a pussy. He's physical. He's going to get tough. He's like 6'10", 240. He's a physical dude. He's skilled in the offensive game, and overall, like, he has a lot of. I think he has potential to be a starting center long term. I think the problem with Wolf is he's 23. How much better can he actually get? However, we see a lot of guys go in the late first, early second with the same description, aka Jalen Brunson, that end up being really good players. Jalen Green was one of those guys that was in that mold too. And he ends up being really good. Obviously, Zach Edey from Purdue ends up being pretty productive as a rookie. So I think you put certain guys in certain places, it'll work out. And I think Edey is a good comparison as well. His skill set works. I think with Wolf, I see him as a tougher Comiskey, but his 3-point shot's nowhere near Frank. But I think his technical abilities, fundamentally in the high post, are the same. And I think that's where the contribution will be for a Nets team that is going to have to rely on him. If they trade Claxton, there's a chance he's going to be playing 20 minutes a night. And I'm excited for that because I think Danny Wolf can stick it out. Demon's a good player. I think it just comes down to how much time is the NBA going to give him, how much time are the Nets going to give him. And is he going to play 30 minutes a night right away? Traore, to be fair, I thought Traore would be like more of a late first round pick. Seems like he has the athleticism. I think the Dennis Schroeder comparisons are lazy. I see more of like, I do like Terrell Brandon, that comparison, because I remember Terrell Brandon back in the day, like a Randy Brown, like a Brandon Armstrong. I think he could be that. I think that's more of a mild. But for him, I think as long as if he hits shots, he's going to be good because athletically speaking, he moves really well. And I think he can defend really well. France really made a presence in this draft. And then Drake Powell, I mean, as I said, I think Drake Powell is just a competitive dude. Like, I see Damari Carroll. I see, George Lynch. I see a little bit of those two guys. Um, I see a little Eric Williams in there too. So I think he could be a consummate, like, key contributor at that, like, 2/3 spot. I don't think he's a guy who could take ball handling duties full time in the NBA. Let's see what happens. But he's a competitive guy. Played for Hubert Davis at North Carolina. Was a good team, but he elevated them. So we'll see what happens there. As far as Brooklyn goes, if Michael Porter Jr. is healthy and Cam Thomas comes back and really plays on that prove it mentality, and they keep Claxton, I think this is a team that, with everything going on in the Eastern Conference, they're a play-in team. However, if Thomas were to not play and they trade Claxton, they miss the playoffs. Now you're going to add another 2 first-round picks to that fold. I'm interested to see what they do at the deadline with some of these guys because they're a super young team. Might not be worth it down the line. It's not like they have a Finney Smith or anyone like that to move on this particular team. But Porter being 27 and his contract expires at the end of next year, Porter could be that guy that just plays for his next contract, if you will. And then, also, like, they got to figure out what, at the same time, you almost wonder if like a Devin Vassell trade would make sense for the Brooklyn Nets. I think that's a trade I'll recommend. I think Devin Vassell for Cam Thomas. Let Cam Thomas play that 1-year prove-it deal in San Antonio. So that way Dylan Harper could be the leader of that second unit. Cam Thomas can be on that second unit with Dylan Harper. San Antonio probably would be a better playoff team with Cam Thomas coming off the bench at that point, but I don't think that's what Cam's going to want. Cam might be better than what they got at the 2 right now with De'Aaron Fox, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to want to put Harper and Fox in there. I think that's a really schematic question for another day. I think if you're Brooklyn, you should have done more this offseason. And I think the reason is they could have done more. They could have taken on more salary. They could have taken on more trades. They could have gotten involved in some really interesting business. I think they might be waiting for Giannis. That's a risky proposal. That's all I'm saying at this point. I think Brooklyn's got a long way to go. I'm anxious to see what happens, but this could be a fun team on paper, but this is not a winning team.